round of questions that we had before lunch, I think is now energized and we are all energized. Thank you very much. Over to you, Assistant Commissioner Nyathi.
Sometimes there is no action which is taken, especially with regards to acts where they are seen attacking members of the public or some journalists. Firstly, I want to thank the media, as alluded to earlier on, in terms of highlighting some of these misdemeanors by police officers. For example, the Harare Showground incident. That issue, we are taking decisive action. Yes, reports have been obtained. I don't want to preempt what is happening on the ground, but one of the officers has been conclusively linked to the TS smoke, and definitely I can assure you action is taken. But one of the issues which our colleagues in the media, you also have to be aware of, is the issue of the presumption of innocence until one is proven guilty, and also the role played by our legal experts. I can cite one incident which occurred at the former Greater Mens, now SPA, where a journalist was attacked by police officers who were using a police car, and they were quickly identified. But when I said action has to be taken, we were disturbed because the journalist withdrew the charges. I don't know why he was withdrawing the charges. Then we said, but why are you withdrawing the charges? He said, no, out of personal interest, I'm withdrawing the charges. Yet he had been assaulted. So you tend to wonder now whether what happened, were there clashes, were there something behind, why was he withdrawing the charges? Something which we were not expecting. But anyway, that's somebody's right. Then on the issue of hotline numbers to allow journalists to make reports, I will certainly follow up this with the Commissioner General of Police. I will also make some recommendations. Now that we have agreed that when one is attacked, say for example, in Harare CBD, you can't expect the very same journalist to go and make a report at Harare Central. But you are also aware that if something happens, for the purpose of record keeping, you need to have a record. You need to have a report at the earliest possible opportunity. So we also sit down with MISA, Media Alliance of Zimbabwe, ZUJ, the Editors Forum, to find a way of getting around this problem. This is a challenge to all of us. We need to address this issue so that we don't continue to have journalists complaining that our cases are not, seeing the light of the day. Then on the case of Impala, where Tonio was saying some journalists were attacked, I request that I be availed with the report reference and also maybe the brief circumstances of what happened so that I could make a follow-up with the relevant police station. Then I'll be able to provide feedback to MISA, ZUJ, and the Media Alliance of Zimbabwe. Then on the issue of COVID-19 letters, where it is said some officers are still asking about these letters, I think there are relaxations which have been made in terms of COVID-19. Of course, the relaxations are not wholesome in that there are certain areas, like for example, bars are not allowed to operate, nightclubs are not allowed to operate, musicians are not allowed to hold some musical shows. But in terms of traveling on the roads, to be quite honest, people are no longer being asked about letters of clearance. What is now happening is that officers are maintaining law and order. The officers are ensuring that whatever is happening, people are putting their safety first in terms of social distancing, in terms of wearing of face mask. Something which I also want to thank the media to say people are not taking the issue of masks very seriously, but the media has been on it. So don't tire on this one. Because it is all who are concerned in terms of health, the journalists, the police, and members of the public. So in terms of letters, if there are officers who are still going around demanding letters for various COVID-19 issues, please let us know, and I can assure you action will be taken. Then my sister there, she did not say out her name, she talked about the issue of culture, where she said officers are using abusive language. They are not above the law. No police officer is allowed or has got an allowance of using abusive language to anyone for that matter, whether it's a journalist, whether it's a member of the public. In any case, we expect officers to be humble. We expect officers to be guided by policing standards, especially the client safety charter, which we marketed to members of the public. So where there are such officers, please let us know, and I can assure you action will be taken. There are some cases which I want colleagues to take note of, where disciplinary action is taken, and sometimes we don't publicize some of these cases. I think we also need to engage each other and to find out how best can we handle such issues, where somebody just scolds somebody and we take action, and how can we give feedback not only to the concerned person but also to members of the public. And then on the report of theft, I also request specifics so that action can be taken. And I want to assure you, those officers were acting outside the mandate of the system, outside the mandate of the Zimbabwe Public Police. So once you give me specifics and we make a follow-up, I can assure you action will be taken. And then my good friend Leopold, thank you very much for the compliment. And I know we have been interacting very closely, so that interaction must continue. You said you were beaten up during lockdown, and I am quite aware about that report. And I also want the reference number so that we can make a follow-up on how the case is progressing. Then on the issue of fake news, so far no one has been arrested by the police for fake news. Our concern is that fake news affects relations in terms of the fact that some of the issues are not correct. Some of the issues, they tend to divide even the media and the police, even the community. That's why I'm saying, people who peddle fake news, they also need to have some ethics. Now we are talking about citizen journalism. I don't know how we can make ethics for them, but it is because of the technology, the use of social media, and there's nothing we can do about it. What we only need to do is to adapt to the social media platforms. And then at the end of the day, we just need to ensure that whatever is happening, we also respond and respond appropriately. But certainly, no one will be arrested as long there is no maybe report to say so-and-so has published a false report, or to say so-and-so has committed a criminal offense. What I want to urge colleagues in the media fraternity, please do not commit criminal offenses. Because as long as somebody makes a report to say a certain journalist has committed a criminal offense, it makes our job very difficult. And it also affects our relationship, because it entails that a report has to be accepted. It means investigations have to be carried out. Somebody has to be called in for questioning. But generally, I want to thank colleagues in the media fraternity. You are well behaved, gentlemen. You need to give yourself a pam-pam. Because not many, to be honest, not many of us are being arrested for criminal acts. Something which we expect that other professions should be, taking a cue from journalists. Despite the fact that at the Fourth Estate you interact with the people from varied backgrounds. So I want to give you your commendations for that. And then my brother Chakanyuka, you talked about, I think, the similar issue which my good sister raised about how can journalists report to the very same officers who would have a normal. There are certain programs which are being, mooted by the organization in terms of rebranding, in terms of going down to the ground to try as much as possible to interact with these junior members so that they realize the immense role the media plays in any society. And it's a fact our officers need to embrace the media. It's a fact our officers need to be cultured on the way things should happen when it comes to relations with the media. And then lastly, Foster, it's really unfortunate. You said you were attacked in January 2020. I also request that I will make a follow-up. While least I will make a follow-up with the Sergeant Mandivavarera at Harare Central. If you could give me the reference number, that will make my job easier. And certainly I'll give a feedback. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Assistant Commissioner Nyathi. Another round of applause for him, ladies and gentlemen. Right, at this moment, I will invite the last three questions for Assistant Commissioner Nyathi, and then we move on to the next segment. Right, your hand was up first.
Thank you very much. My name is Lennox Ntlanga. Assistant Commissioner, I think if every police officer was as level-headed as you, I think we'll have a very happy. I've always found him to be cool, calm, and very clear. I think I did raise this issue some time back, but it's part of MISA, about how we can assist each other in terms of building the capacity of ZRP, because I think it all behoves on all of us to assist and play a role in this culture change that is being envisaged as ZRP. And one area, of course, is the area of training, where training perhaps from the top, where at the top we need to rope in MISA to engage with the top officers to understand the role of media. Because that's where the problem starts, where the guys at the top don't realize the role of the media, what media is, how it operates. I think we need to find a level ground where the senior guys will have that sense of appreciation. Then it can be cascaded down when it comes to your training, your refresher courses, where we can actually volunteer to come through and be part of that training. And it also creates that camaraderie between the two, you know. And once we inculcate that kind of relationship, I think it will go a long way in changing attitudes and perceptions about each other. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Wamhlanga. Next.
Okay, thank you very much. I would like to commend Assistant Commissioner Paul Nyathi for what he said about the police. But, like my colleague said, if all police officers were level-headed like you, we could be having the best police force in Africa or the world. But we are still having the same problems that we have encountered for a very long time. Like Leo talked about police being good when covering demonstrations, but I also beg to differ, because in most instances when you want to take a picture at the police officers, they will tell you mukaramba mchita izozozo turikukurovai or turikuenda nemi. That has always continued, and I don't think it's going to stop anytime soon. So I would like it if you could educate the police officers the importance of journalists. Just for reference sake, on the day that I was beaten and I broke my wrist, had a plaster for 3 months in 2019, nothing has ever happened. Do you know why I was beaten? The police officers knew exactly that I'm a journalist, but they didn't respect that. They told me, stop taking photos. If you continue doing that, we're going to beat you. Just because I knew my right, I knew my responsibility, I continued filming the incident, but they continued to beat me. The video is there, but nothing has happened. That's my first year recommendation to the ZRP. Then the second recommendation is about, in most cases when you take your case to court, if you take it to your lawyers, they tend to postpone cases each and every time. Your lawyer tells you, we are meeting the civil division from ZRP. Just after 2 hours, they will call you. The meeting has been postponed. This is happening almost every day. It looks like the civil division at ZRP does not respect lawyers, does not respect the justice delivery system in Zimbabwe. They keep on postponing it. Can you do something about that, Commissioner? Thank you.
Thank you. Before I respond to my comrade Fan, I would like to add on what my brother Lennox had said. I think another problem is that we've been using the same form, building on to what my brother Lennox said, where they have volunteered to teach. I think there's also need for police officers to interact with journalists on a social platform. Whether be it a football, playing social football. That way there is what you defined, you say it was camaraderie, something like that. You see, saka kana tikazosangana chero kubasa ka tachitamba tese bhora uchandirovi easily, something like that. Using the same formula each and every time, discussing, I think it was. And funny, I did not say police officers are now good. No, that varipa harvesters is varipo izvezvi. I've been there. Avachaiti zviya zvavaita kudhara zvokutokurova vakuti majournalists swedera iwo chienda iwo apa takuda kudai, unlike kudhara kwekuti vaingokubatanidza votongodhila nemibava.
No, thanks. I think if I had an opportunity, I was going to call the president. But social soccer. Commissioner, the ZMC bill before Parliament describes a media practitioner as a person engaged in the writing, editing, or transmitting of news and information to the public, and includes a broadcaster, journalist, and an editor. But the first part, which says editing, writing, transmitting of news and information to the public, that's your job. And I want to believe that you are rightfully in this place because you are also a media practitioner. Now, my question is, being a media practitioner responsible for writing statements on behalf of the police, what is your view when an accused person in a matter involving criminal activities directs the police to issue a statement on their behalf? And I'm trying to deal with media rights as I say this question. An accused person, or an allegedly accused person, or a possibly a person who conspired to commit a crime, issues a statement directing the police to issue a statement in that they are free or they are innocent. How does that interfere with your rights as a media practitioner? Especially if we are talking to the level of a person as a member of the first family. I just wanted to know your thinking on that.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chikwinya and other guys who asked the questions. At this moment, I will ask Assistant Commissioner Nyathi to respond. That is the last segment of questions, guys. Over to you.
Sorry, so if it's the last, can I also make an intervention?
I can follow up as well. In the interest of time, I think we can make a follow-up later.
Yeah, but corporate facilitator, I think some of this is also very important, which is why we have had the stakeholders conference on the International Day to End Impunity for Crimes Against Journalists. So, but it's okay, facilitator, I'm not taking your your time management thing. I just wanted to make an intervention around the resolutions that we have between the police and ourselves, to actually say perhaps if we go back to what we resolved, some of these issues can also be dealt with. For example, there was that commitment that the police is going to conduct outreach programs, conduct lecture meetings with media houses, training institutions, and newsrooms as part of a sensitization process. It was also agreed that where police has concerns with the media, they should engage professional bodies such as MISA, ZUJ, VMCZ to encourage professionalism and accountability. We had about 12 resolutions, part of which I was prompted to make the intervention by Leopold, because that agreement is also there, that, you know, there should be that interface at various forums between the media and the police. So perhaps if we go back to these resolutions and re-give them life, some of the matters will be all taken care of. That's my intervention. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much, Comrade Kabila. They said it's an important day, so I will allow the last one, right? There was a female in gender.
All right, thank you. Commissioners, Tarangundoitwa Yvonne Mchak. All right, the talk. What does that mean? It means, I don't know, Kuti, if you were doing it behind closed doors, that you engage with your police officers on basic etiquette on how to handle the media. Maybe it's about time that you also involve our stakeholders, Anazuj, Anazoko, Anamisa, etc., so that they also witness that, so that at least we are empowered enough to stand and say, police, what you are doing is wrong. Because Bangapasha not was got, you are undermining my authority as an officer. They are threatening us, they are intimidating us, just because they feel they are protected by law. We are recognized, but I think we don't want to have a situation where we seem to have a thief, the police. Mapurisa edu, gati respect as much as we respect them. But I think, Commissioner, maybe just peradventure, if you have a workshop ne mapurisa enyu, chimboti dedza yo tizvionere kuti shuwa vanhu vari kuudzwa information pavanobuda pavari kubhehave according to their own thinking and not the thinking yepolice. Thank you.
Thank you very much, my sister. Yeah, you'll be the last one, comrade. Yeah?
Okay, I will be very quick since now under the watch. Commissioner, there's that issue that you spoke about as a follow-up on policing the police, which is a major concern to most journalists, especially when we are under attack. I don't really think we need many numbers per se, but maybe probably for lack of better words, I'm very happy there are honorable members of parliament here, and we are also here. And this is a stakeholder conference. If we are to suggest that some form of a commission where media players can report to some independent bodies that you can help us, where we also have got senior police officers like you. I think that would make a lot of sense, because we are much more comfortable to then report there. It's not an issue of saying can we have 4 numbers in Harare or two or more different 4 numbers, because we are losing confidence, especially when we are the same victims, to then go back and report to the same police. Is it possible by way of suggestion within your hierarchy to say, well, the media players are actually suggesting if there could be some sort of a site or a center or a commission or kasakuke media where we can actually also go through and have some of these issues reported, and more importantly, where we know we are working with a certain department, and then we can even follow up on investigations to say, okay, where are we with this case, without me necessarily asking almost the next door of a perpetrator to say, where are you as far as incriminating your other police officers concerned. It really defeats the whole logic in that case. Now that I've asked that one, another follow-up, Commissioner, Mati Bawara Gavara. And then you suppose was another Baba Martini was my boy. Taifunga Davura Matravara.
The issue of bars.
Yes,
as far as the lockdown regulations are concerned, bars where people can access, buy their beer, drink while enjoy music, they are currently not allowed to operate unless if there are changes to that effect.
Pardon? There are like many places where people are crowded each and every weekend. And what you are saying now is a big story. Are you telling us all those public places where we are there up until 4 a.m. they are illegally operating? Because
I think, Tonio, ladies and gentlemen, this is a serious issue which has been raised by Tonio. Only yesterday, we were discussing the issue of this man who decided to tell it as it is after he had been robbed of his car. He says, I was coming out of this bar at 2 a.m. I'm telling the truth. This is a report which we are currently investigating. And we were discussing at work to say, well, how do we do it now? Can we charge this person? He has lost his car. His family was not aware that he was at this bar where people can buy their alcohol, go and drink at home, not to go and drink inside the bar. Of course, there are some special licenses for hotels and other restaurants who have been allowed to operate, but also with certain limitations. So I would also request the media to highlight that to the public. And of concern, we have had murder cases at bars. Yeah? Late night. We also have had rape cases at bars late at night. So it is in our own interest to also follow the law so that people will not cry foul. I know some of my colleagues, you might also get 1 or 2. I don't want to comment about that. So moving on to the business of the day, some workshops, to have some meetings with the command in Blawayo, the command in Harare, with the Zuj, with the Media Alliance of Zimbabwe, Editors Forum, and the MISA. This I undertake to do, gentlemen, and I will also engage the Commissioner General of Police, so that we don't continue having some of these problems which can easily be solved on the ground. So this is what I'm going to assure this House. Definitely, we'll work on it. Now that some of the lockdown restrictions have been relaxed, so nothing can stop us from having a one-day workshop in Bulawayo with the police commanders there, a one-day workshop in Harare. I think these are the cities which are giving us problems when it comes to relations between the media and the police. If we start with these big cities, we will not have a problem, maybe in Chinoi, in Gweru. Yeah, of course, Mashingo. Yeah, thank you very much. So we'll start with maybe Bulawayo, Harare, and Mashingo. Because we definitely need to do something. All of us, not one entity. Then, Fanny, you talked about your incident in 2019, which was highly publicized. I want to make a follow-up in terms of how the case is progressing from the relevant station. Then on the issue of the police civil division and lawyers, I also want to find out what is happening. Because normally when our police lawyers respond to some of these issues, they don't do it in isolation. They work closely with the civil division in the Attorney General's office. So what we may need to do is to find out what is happening between the lawyers who will be representing maybe a certain journalist, the police lawyers, and the civil division in the Attorney General's office. So what I will do is I will bring it to the attention of these three offices to find out what is really the problem so that we can work towards addressing it. Then on the issue of police officers, who I think, Leopold, what you raised is similar to what my brother Lennox said, and also what Yvonne said on the issue of taking practical action. I think if we start having workshops, if we start having meetings with media bodies and the police commanders on the ground, if we start with the province, then we'll cascade it to district, I think it will go a long way in address some of these problems. I don't know. I leave it to you, ladies and gentlemen, but that's my view. And I can assure you the Commissioner General of Police will approve so that we can start interacting with these officers and then we address some of these problems. And then on the issue of the bill before Parliament, the Zimbabwe Media Commission bill, and the subsequent question by Honorable Chikwinya, that case went to court today, and in terms of the law, it's now sub judice for me to comment. I would want to wait to hear what happened in court today. And then, Nigel, you talked about resolutions. I think we also need to circulate these resolutions and maybe to recirculate them to our colleagues, to our journalists, so that we refresh our minds. You see, because COVID-19 has affected so many issues. Then Yvonne, I think we have replied to your concern. Then Tonio, the issue of policing the police, I want to put it together with what we are proposing. If we come up with a resolution, now that I'm saying we need to go down to the ground, we need to go to provinces, we need to go to district and engage with the police commanders, the officer in charge station, the officer commanding district, the officer commanding province, so that we try to address some of these problems and at the same time try to impress it to them that the media plays a key role, not only in terms of informing and educating the public, but also in terms of policy and its effect. Some of the cases which we investigate, they are coming through you guys. Some of the cases where we make recoveries and take to court, they are coming through the media. So the media is part of policy, and no one can deny or dispute that fact. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Assistant Commissioner Nyathi. A round of applause for him, comrades. Yeah. I can see we are thoroughly satisfied. All right, we can always engage later. Right, at this moment, I will invite Comrade Kabila, Comrade Nigel, to come and present on the resolutions renewing commitments between the police and the media. That's it.
Okay, yeah, so I'm not going to necessarily come forward, but it's already one practical step that has already been alluded to shop with ground commanders. It's unfortunate he is quickly dashed out, but so as a way forward, Comrade Facilitator will recirculate the resolutions with the indulgence, obviously, of the House, and also perhaps have a follow-up engagement with the police, with
Looking for a certain criminal in courts by the name. It's only me who is allowed to call him a criminal for certain reasons. I'm looking for Comrade Rusero Alex, a senior lecturer with the University of West Indies at the moment, Jamaica. He's from Jamaica, and we are We have been humbly honored by his presence today. Comrade Risero from the University of West Indies is here to present on reflections on the effects of COVID-19 on the operations and sustainability of the media. So it's a paper which is taking an academic twist or academic critical lens, fusing both theory and empirical evidence. I know Comrade Risero is an energetic speaker. He doesn't need a microphone, but this afternoon I will just give him one. Comrade Risero, over to you. I think this one is
not working.
I think it's working. It will work.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Fantastic. You know, making a presentation after lunch is also good because other problems would have been dealt with. You talk of the problems of the stomach, your metabolism issues. It's also good, so I hope we won't be boring. What time do I have, Comrade Facilitator? No, you can't give a lecturer 10 minutes to speak. I will try to be short and precise, but not 10 minutes. Thank you. Before I make my presentation, I have a paper entitled COVID-19 Ramifications on the Media in Zimbabwe. Unpacking, excellent. COVID-19 Ramifications on the Media in Zimbabwe, Unpacking the Sustainability and Operational Constraints. It's a research that was commissioned by the Media Alliance of Zimbabwe, although views are captured in this paper are solely that of the researcher and not necessarily reflecting those of the Media Alliance. Unfortunately, in the morning when Comrade Kabila was making some acknowledgements, he also made reference to some key takeaways of 2019. The first one was the highest standards of ethical journalism that you talked to earlier. I am pleased to inform you that, and maybe if Comrade Loft, you may allow me just to unpack in one sentence, that the Voluntary Media Council of Zimbabwe has also commissioned a research on the state of journalism ethics in Zimbabwe, and I was privileged to be their researcher. And the key finding was that ethical journalism in Zimbabwe is actually on an incipient decline. There's been incipient decline of ethical journalism, let's say in between the period of the previous election of 2013 up to now. It's a sad story. Then there's also the issue of multi-stakeholder and the transparent approach, which include grassroots. Yes, we have tried to participate both as grassroots and as experts to the extent even of forking our own resources, following parliamentary portfolio committees. I think, Honorable Chikwinya, you saw me in Mtare. Yeah. So that was quite commendable. Then there is this whole array of issues of media practitioners, co-regulation, etc., which some of us with a keen interest in media have been following religiously. However, Mr. Facilitator said at least there is something that is taking place in as much as media reform is concerned, which I beg to differ, because he said at least we are going somewhere. So I was trying to locate the somewhere all along since morning, and I have discovered that the somewhere we are going as much as reform is concerned is a certain place called Norway. Having said so, ladies and gentlemen, let me come to the nuggets of my paper, COVID-19 Ramifications on the Media in Zimbabwe, Unpacking the Sustainability and Operational Constraints. You know, I had made a PowerPoint, but I'm seeing, you know, PowerPoints can also be problematic. You can make points without power, or you can have power without points. So like any country in the world, Zimbabwe was taken by surprise by the advent of the global pandemic of coronavirus, which was firstly detected in China in December 2019 in Wuhan. And together with Dr. Alakat, we spent 45 days in Wuhan, sometime in 2015. It was later confirmed in February 2020 by World Health Organization, which then said that the disease is caused by a certain virus called nCoV. which was named COVID-19, which is the acronym of coronavirus disease 2019. So it is against this background that the media in Zimbabwe was also not spared by the calamity of COVID. This was made worse by the amount of misinformation and false news circulating on social networks, which resulted in much health anxiety and panic behavior, such as cancellation of travels, increased visits to the hospitals, panic buying, buying of drugs, xenophobia, and even worse, taking drugs without a medical prescription. All these were the problems that we found ourselves grappling with as the media in general and as an entire populace in particular. In Zimbabwe, the mainstream media, at least according to my research, its handling of the pandemic was also found wanting, largely due to lack of preparedness, training, fear, and inadequate experience of journalists to cover pandemics of that magnitude. This was the biggest story of our lifetime. We are unlikely maybe to see any other story of this gravity or of this magnitude in our lifetime as a generation of media practitioners or journalists. And because of that, you'd realize that there was a little bit of chaos in terms of handling the reportage of coronavirus. So apart from the topical issues of sustainability and operational constraints, which are topical in the context of this study, COVID-19 also impacted a lot in terms of ethical compliance, as well as proliferation of fake news, which I shall also highlight to later. So we also need to understand the problem from an academic gist. What is it that has triggered this research? This research is triggered by the realization of the role that journalism plays in society. There are certain prescriptions, there are certain expectations that the populace, that the public have in as much as journalism is concerned. And when the journalists fail to deploy such roles, then we have a problem. And in the case of COVID, we have a total failure of journalists to deploy those roles expected of them because of various reasons, some of them which I have already highlighted above. So you'd realize that the thrust of the media should be one that fosters the growth of a well-informed and well-educated society that is able to adapt and survive in a constantly ever-changing local and global environment. A society in which people are able to relate to their environment, to each other, and to the cosmos in a way that provides meaning and purpose of their lives. So by and large, these are normative roles. These are the idealistic purposes that the press should serve to function to the society. So when that kind of roles fail to be deliberated, to be depicted by the press, then we have the problem, leading me to move on to another topical subject, which is the crux of the problem. What then is the crux of the problem, having laid out the roles of the press? The expectations that the people have can only fully be attained when media performs its social responsibility role as well as watchdog over important institutions in society and speaking truth to power. But sadly, in Zimbabwe, in the Zimbabwean context, this is exactly the opposite of what is taking place. And coinciding now with the International Day to End Impunity and Criminalization of the work of journalists, you would find that journalists actually became endangered species in Zimbabwe at a time they were supposed to deploy a social responsibility role of equipping the society with knowledge on how to deal with COVID. I'm not going to talk about methodology. We don't want to take you back to class, but by and large, this research was qualitative. I had a series of interviews with editors, media, civil society, journalists, and a total of 58 interviews were conducted, of which only about 14 were female. I move on to the first aspect, which is that of sustainability constraints which the media in Zimbabwe experienced under COVID-19. COVID-19 had huge consequences on the media in terms of survival. For months on end, people were no longer reading hard copies. They got information from their devices. You know, those soft copies, they simply circulated as PDFs, thrown in WhatsApp groups, etc. So the print edition, for the umpteenth time, it was suspended or partially died a natural death then, because that meant that people had to transition from their behaviors from having been accustomed to the reading of the hard copy print edition to going online. And this had huge impacts, which explains why up to this day, according to the survey that I did, print media is struggling with an average print run of 5,000 copies, ranging between 5,000 copies, 2,500 copies, and according to the PEMSEC's revelation in the morning, some with now at an average print run of 1,000 copies. Now, the worrisome aspect of this little print run is that these are copies and not necessarily sales. So if a media house prints 1,000 copies, this will not translate to a sale of 1,000 newspapers. At times, there might be an average maybe of a third of the total print run being sold and the rest being returned as returns. And we are talking about the three dailies in form of the Herald, Daily News, and Newsday. And imagine, because the livelihood, the survival, the lifeblood of a newspaper, apart from that of adverts, is also derived on the direct sale. And if there are no sales, it will backfire, it will impact on all media products. It also impacts on all media personnel, ranging from the foot soldiers, the journalists themselves, those in the marketing, those in the distribution, even the vendors, as well as even those who transport the newspapers. That was the huge impact in as much as the sustainability is concerned. So the dire situation is one where the employers had no choice but to also lay off some employees. But you realize that public journalism is likely to flourish in an environment where media is also modeled as a business. Public service journalism, journalism that is aimed at fulfilling the public good, must also be modeled in certain ways where the media house is self-sustaining, and that self-sustenance is part and parcel of revenue that the media house is likely to derive from sales. And so if those sales are not realized, it means there is no sustenance. If there is no sustenance, it also even threatens the posterity of the existence of that media house in question. So in the current realities of COVID-19 and even in its aftermath, media is likely to be increasingly vulnerable to capture, as it will survive not on the basis of business viability, but reduced as a charity case to survive. I have had experiences of some testimonies of editors now literally begging to corporates for adverts so that they remain standing on their feet, so that at least a media house can afford partially to pay salaries. So media, notably print media in Zimbabwe, faces existential challenges and must endure endless debate about what life will look like in a post-COVID-19 era. The pandemic will press industries to make sure sustainability is authentic and truly connected to delivering value and meaningful change, which at the moment our media has not been able to deliver. So how is this going to affect the Zimbabwe in general over the past years? Because media operation cannot be separated from the political economic infrastructure. The media cannot be better than any other industry that it is operating under. And Zimbabwe's industries for the past 2 decades or so have been operating under duress, because we have seen a total informalization of the entire economy up to 95%. And the entire economy of about 95% being informal means that there is less consideration and less attention by those running those businesses in the informal sector to see the value of the media through certain critical items such as advertising. So if Zimbabwe has been grappling under these circumstances even before or prior to the advent of COVID, imagine what of now that we have COVID in our midst. So while the media, particularly print, have been able to innovate and survive these challenges, COVID presents an existential threat to an industry that was already limping. Incomes, according to my survey, have fallen by as much as 60%. In certain cases, adverts had to be cancelled due to the lockdown. At the beginning of the country's lockdown in March, Alpha Media Holdings, the publishers of Newsday, Zimind, and Standard, announced that it had stopped printing its hard copies and would instead produce e-paper versions of each publication. So what are the implications? You know, with the digital proliferation, one would be a subscriber to the e-publication and throws it to a, say, WhatsApp group which has got 100 people. What it means, there's a value chain of 100 people who are accessing an e-paper edition for free, who will also relay it. So you are likely to have at least 1 million people who are just deriving the media product for free, courtesy of whether they can afford data or not, which though that money is not translated to revenue of the media house, but service providers like your internet, your Econet, etc., who provide services for you to access internet. So at the AMH, they also announced that all staff members would get a 50% pay cut. And during lunch, I was joking with colleagues that a lot has been said about the salaries of teachers, but you'll be shocked the salaries that journalists get. Now imagine if 50% of that salary is struck off in terms of sustainability. What does it mean? The value chain, even the households, the families, where some journalists are actually the breadwinners. So there were certainly domino effects even outside the newsroom in as much as the sustainability is concerned. This was not only a situation unique to AMH. Zim Papers also, which publishes Sunday Mail, Herald, Chronicle, and Sunday News, etc., also recorded some redundancies with the correspondents and workers in departments such as printing being laid off. AB Communications, again, the proprietors of ZFM and Business Times, laid off several staff members, including journalists, in May. So in total, all subscriptions of all media houses rates sank to an all low on the Zimbabwean market, with companies relying on street sales, which could not come by easily because of observations of lockdowns. There was a few traffic in critical points where newspapers are sold because majority of people were restricted in terms of movement, and they could not therefore consider risking breaking those lockdown regulations for the sake of accessing a newspaper. So you find that this informs why a noble institution in form of the Media Institute of Southern Africa wrote to the Minister of Information, Comrade Monica Mtrangwa, proposing the setting up of a media sustainability bailout rescue package. This would then at least re-energize, recapitalize the industry that was facing imminent existential threat up to now. I'm not sure whether the minister has taken that consideration seriously, because we haven't heard anything. And MISA had brilliant proposals to that effect. For example, suggestions of scrapping of tax or duty in terms of exemptions and moratoriums on newsprint and other mass media and distribution equipment, so that at least the little that media proprietors would spare to try to meet government regulations on revenue and taxation would then be reinvested and cushion or seek to oil up the industry that was on its knees. But apart from these sustainability threats, you would realize that all that was happening in Zimbabwe in general, Africa broadly, and the world democracy became the biggest loser, the biggest casualty of media being brought on its knees because of COVID-19 was democracy. Because you realize that in countries like Zimbabwe, we are a quasi-dictatorship. We are a quasi-authoritarian state. So there was really a delicate balance between authoritarianism and compliance to World Health Organization regulations. To the government, it was actually a perfect opportunity to lock down even the rights, to lock down even the privileges, the freedoms, more than just complying, because the same zeal that the government had in ensuring that it pins on liberties of the people, we haven't seen that kind of energy or that kind of zeal or that kind of effort anywhere in the history since 1980 until now. So there is actually a sinister, invisible hand of a government actually desperate and praying that let COVID stay and stay forever, so that political parties, oppositions are buried in COVID, elections are buried in COVID, everything including civil society is also buried in COVID, and only ceremonies at State House take place, ceremonies at a certain party headquarters take place, because otherwise they are the ones exempted or immune to all forms of regulation. So democracy became the biggest casualty. Yet a free and unfettered media is one of the pillars of democracy. Thus, the collapse of media organizations poses a threat to democracy. Now, what do you have in Zimbabwe? We still have memories of 1 August 2018. We have memories of what happened the following year around 9 January. And we are conscious of the insatiable appetite the government has in as much as descending on people's rights who share an alternative view are concerned. So COVID cannot be an exceptional. Leading me to question why the PEMSEC are actually left in a jiffy, because these things are supposed to be directed to him. We cannot have a situation where every year he comes and lives in a jiffy only to say, he's here with us. And he was talking about the bashing. I didn't see the bashings. I didn't even see the knob carries thrown to his direction. But he has left. It's not fair, because we spent sleepless nights researching, preparing to relay information to the government. But the government disappears. It's not there. So it's not fair on our party. It's not also healthy, because we would have sent sleepless nights. So I move on to operational constraints. I am about to finish, Comrade Facilitator. In terms of operational constraints, COVID-19 imposed a very difficult working environment for journalists, and it also exposed the weaknesses of journalism in many ways, to the extent that journalists were not very organized, and they even did not know how to cover it. It was the biggest story, unlikely to be seen, as was alluded to by the ZINEF chairperson, Dumisani Mleya, in an interview I held with him, but which was an opportunity that was lost. Most of the reports published lacked that technical knowledge of COVID, and it took more than 3 months for the media to report on the scientific causes and how to prevent media. So for the first time, our journalism in Zimbabwe turned back the clock to reporting. You know, there's a distinction between grappling everyone, but we're still expected to file a story, to churn out a story, and we must actually give them credit for working under difficult circumstances. Although the reports lacked effects on the pandemic, at times journalists would just download information from the internet, copy, paste, then just inserted a byline. Some of us who are crazy, if you do copy and paste and put on anti-plagiarism, you would see a 99% plagiarized document, meaning only the byline is the original content of that. So it was quite appealing. Some of the reports lacked effects on the pandemic. Some stories appeared more threatening to the readers. There was a shock therapy we were reminded of the first instances of how HIV and AIDS were handled in Zimbabwe. You still remember even those shocking adverts that were posted by ZANU in 1990 that voting for Zoom is equivalent to having HIV or AIDS, vote for ZANU and leave. That was the kind of reportage. It was a shock and knock. Readers were shocked. They were knocked under the kind of stories that were being churned out during the reportage of COVID. Then you have a certain daily which wrongly accused a patient of being infected by COVID-19 and recklessly labeled that patient a spreader of the virus. Imagine. And it was on page 1. It was uncalled for, it was unnecessary, it was reckless, but these are the kind of realities that occurred under the circumstances of this research, because that patient ended up suffering due to stigma. So in the first weeks of the pandemic, there was a bit of a downside in the way the media reported on the progression, and there was more sensationalism, reports which intentionally or unintentionally caused panic amongst audiences in terms of how deadly and dreadful the virus was. So particularly concerning the state of Zimbabwe's preparedness to the response, the media also largely failed to protect some of the victims of COVID-19. We now have certain streets called the COVID street because a certain family was once infected by the virus. It is the obligation of the media to then come and fill the vacuum of such kind of ignorance which the society will be propagating. There was also in that respect, therefore, failure to achieve fairness and balance in reporting issues and impact, as the citizen's story was usually ignored, and in turn more news focused on what the authorities had to say. It was all about statistics. For the first time, COVID did not give journalists room to verify. It was the government which was the authentic provider of information, and we know what the government is capable of doing in as much as the figures and the statistics are concerned. The ZANU-PF government in particular is not very friendly when it comes to issues including divulging statistics to the public. So you have a certain media house, again, dismally failing to live to the standards of journalism when it published a map showing places where Zororo Makamba had visited after arriving in the country while he was COVID-19 positive. He had tested positive. So one of the places indicated by that map was Midland State University campus in Harare. So it meant that any other locality close to number 1 union became also a victim that suffered because of misinformation, because of inaccurate information, because of fake news that was sensationally spread by that daily paper. Then we also witnessed a rampant or excess issues of polarity. COVID-19 rekindled the bygone era which we all did not want to think about again in as much as media polarization is concerned. You have the state media, it went on a full force to defend all government actions in as much as the state of preparedness was concerned, whilst the private media also went in a full force to expose government's lack of preparedness in as much as COVID-19 was concerned. When I teach journalism, I always tell people, my students, that one of the roles of a newspaper is that when you read a story, you must emerge wiser than you were before. But in the case of Zimbabwe, notably in the case of COVID, when you read COVID stories, you would become more stupid than when you were before you read that kind of paper. And that polarization was not necessary at all, because this was all about saving public interest. So I will briefly, because of that, do a peep into the ethical dilemmas of Zimbabwe's media during COVID-19. You know, I am a fan of ethics, having emerged recently from the study that I carried for VMCZ on the state of journalism ethics in Zimbabwe. most of the time, journalists were reporting on things that they did not know and something unfamiliar. So this is purely unethical. You cannot report on things that you yourself do not know. You cannot purport to report or churn out information. The role of media is to inform and educate. How dare would you inform and educate the populace on the very same things that you yourself you do not have knowledge about? But that's the experience that we witnessed during the coverage of the COVID-19 story. Then the COVID-19 also brought in a new way of doing things as men resorted to work from home. Journalists are amongst the people who need constant and consistent supervision, which is practically impossible to implement when somebody is working from home. Because by definition, journalism is actually the science of verification. If you say Mr. So-and-so claimed this, it is the obligation of the editor or the desk editor to recall, to reconfirm, to re-verify, and to make that person abide by certain ethics. But when someone will be at home, he will simply tell you, the person did not pick up the phone. And what would you do? At times it was also issues about resource constraints, issues of data, etc., which were depicted by that brilliant video by Gender Media Connector in the morning. I move on to with the traditional media posterity in Zimbabwe. So what? Is traditional media or legacy media, as it is called, is it likely to survive in the post-COVID environment? Firstly, there is need for remodeling. The old ways of doing things are a bygone era. And this remodeling is still a challenge. We come from universities where we were told to go online, teach online. So teaching online makes you feel empty at times because you are sort of delivering a lecture to an artificial audience. But that's the way to go. We have to embrace it. Businesses also have to be sensitized that it's online where business now is. So they must not be stuck in the past, having been used to traditional ways of hard copy, etc. So this is the new normal. And if traditional media is to survive, it has to adopt. Then we must also start to question the role of the state. The state has done nothing. And where is the keenness of the state in as much as making sure the fourth estate remains standing on its feet? The state has not shown any interest. Instead, they are actually rubbing their hands, waiting to write the obituary of the rather fourth estate. So we start to question the sincerity of the state in as much as all those purported media reforms are concerned, because we have issues to do with state capture, for example. It doesn't make sense that you're a private media proprietor, you sit on a certain committee called the Presidential Advisory Committee. Private media is supposed to speak truth to power, is supposed to hold the president accountable. How can you be both at the same time? You want to advise the president, you also want to keep him on check. So those are some manifestations of state capture that we are witnessing, where in-laws of the president own 33% shares in certain media houses. So the state is on a deliberate mission to decimate, wreck the media altogether, as has been the case, of course, on what they did to the public media. Then what of media training? Because media training are also lagging behind. You can't expect a media trainer to teach on reporting disasters if the media trainer himself or herself has never been taught or oriented in that. So there is an over-assumption. You know, I am one of the most vocal anti-IMPI activists. So IMPI came with a certain bashing tendency of bashing everyone, bashing trainers, bashing this, bashing that, but it forgot the political economy that was surrounding the operation of the media ever the period that IMPI was looking into. One of it was the dire straits in the training institutions, where we go an extra mile pulling our own resources, 95% knowledge of what I have imparted to my students has never been one cascaded or acquired from school. It's one directly from self-innovation of studying and restudying. But lecturers at certain time, they also need to be trained. They also need to be capacitated. So this is a challenge I'm giving you, ZUJ, MAS, VMCZ. You routinely give certain trainings in courts where you also deliberately leave out media trainers. They won't be trained by anyone. Then what about the public attitude? What is the public attitude to the press right now? The public attitude to the press right now is where they are now relying on WhatsApp, on gossip, for information more than the legacy media. And we must rethink the direction that media must take. Comrade Facilitator, move on quickly to recommendations. Proprietors ought to realize that we are in a new normal which may last indefinitely. So the artificial strategies of trying to lay off staff, etc., to stand on feet, they are not going to work. They must also remodel. They must remodel in certain ways that are sustainable and in certain ways that are profitable, but which do not impact on livelihoods, courtesy of retrenching or dismissing workers. Old ways of doing things are a bygone era. New normal is with us and we must brace for that change in a viable way. As I have indicated earlier, training and retraining in digital proliferation strategies, packaging, dissemination, encoding and decoding of information and news is required. Trainers who are also frontline must be targeted for staff development. It is also high time the Media Development Fund should be operationalized. Boiling back to the issue of the role of the state. We have a Media Development Fund. I do not know whether it exists in practice or it's just on paper, which is aimed at alleviating some of these crises. Where is the Media Development Fund? Where is the money, revenue that government derives from taxing media? It should be plowed back to the media for the media to survive, because journalism as an industry has no money. There is no money in the business of our journalism. The state should take a sincere role to try to ensure that the fourth estate remain, because it is to the benefit of the state to have a healthy media than one that is not healthy. So I move on to conclusion. Whereas we are concluding this session in the comfort zone of a hotel, under the trinkets and junkets of air conditioning and fluorescent lights, this is the sad reality that Zimbabwe finds itself in under the current new dispensation, purporting to institute some media reforms, which in essence are media deforms. I have borrowed this from IMS Yendo on their tweet. It reads, of the 277 journalists murdered for their work in the past 10 years, no perpetrators have been prosecuted in 83% of the cases. That's the sad reality in line with the theme of this year. We have Newsiana Statenda Julius, who was arrested in Mtare on 3rd March, while freelancer Kudzanaim Sengi was arrested in Central Gweru at the same time. Newsday and Voice of America correspondent Nunurai Jena was on 2 April arrested whilst filming a police roadblock in Chinoi on 2 April in Komapo, and was charged with disorderly conduct. A reporter for the Weekly tells him Beatrice Ngumbawanda was on 8 April arrested for violating the lockdown in Chiredzi. Although he provided his press card to the police, he was released after being held for nearly 2 hours. On July 30, investigative journalist Mdudu Smatutu's home was raided by the police in connection with organizing a demo slated for July 31. Since he was not at his house, the police went on to arrest his sister. The case has since died a natural death. Opo Chingono was arrested for whistleblowing corruption that was taking place in the Ministry of Health pertaining the procurement of COVID-19 medicines supply to the tune of USD 60 million. The scheme was also linked to the president's son, and true to Hope's expose, this led to the dismissal of the health minister. But as if this was not enough, Chingono was also detained in jail between July 20 and September 2, 2020. We can't be going somewhere, comrade, under these realities. We are going nowhere, in as much as our media reforms are concerned. So do we need to go where others are coming from? Why are we successfully converting ourselves into a North Korea? If we are going to thrive, is this industry is going to revolutionize, is one where the state should not have any business in media business, apart from creating an enabling environment where journalism flourish. Thank you.
Another round of applause for Comrade Rusero. Yeah. That's the Comrade Rusero. I spent 45 days with in Wuhan, sometime in 2015. I know Comrade Rusero as an erudite, eloquent, and a knowledgeable speaker, a fearless one. Comrade Rusero, I enjoyed your presentation, and I'd like to believe even most of your audience, they had multiple intellectual orgasms listening to this discourse. So well done, comrade. Multiple ones, I can assure you. Multiple ones, yeah. So, Comrade Rusero, your presentation, comrade, it was quite enlightening, critical. It was beyond the academic discourse. I like the fact that it could relate with the everyday fabric or practice in the media industry. But I was left reflecting, thinking, you constantly asked to say, or you constantly reiterated that we are not heading somewhere. Certainly we are heading somewhere, but that somewhere is quite subjective. But upon listening to your presentation, Comrade Rusero, I was left wondering. There is this pertinent question which was raised by Professor Andrew Ma, as well as Professor Borok from the University of Oxford, to say, is news over? Is news over? I am thinking about that when the specific reference to how journalism perhaps was found wanting when it comes to reporting on COVID-19. Once again, as you mentioned, we witnessed the rise of what academics like Ranger Chuma have referred to as patriotic journalism, oppositional journalism. We had these competing models of journalism evident on how the pandemic was covered. So at the end of the day, facts were brutalized as the media became key hegemonic and ideological sites. So instead of educating the nation, the media perhaps were found wanting. And then, so perhaps, Comrade Rusero, I wouldn't know, journalism from its original days or its intention or its philosophies, it is about the quest for truth or the quest for knowledge. But whose truth are we talking about? And then he also made reference to how perhaps the government struggled. We expected them to protect the media during this COVID-19 pandemic. But once again, they failed in terms of creating perhaps a desired space where we have an unfettered flow of discourses, unfettered flow of information, a deliberative public sphere where a majority can access and debate or exchange and discourse on key issues. Right, having said that, Comrade Rusero, at this moment, I would like to open the floor. If we can have any 1 or 2, 3 or 4 issues emerging from his presentation before we move on to the last aspect of the day. Any responses, Comrade Rusero, you'll be happy. Right, I can see someone here.
All right, good afternoon. Many thanks to the presentation by my brother, Alex. I have two questions. The first question doesn't directly relate to the presentation, but to something that he said just before he got into the presentation. And then the second question naturally relates to the presentation. Let me go to the first question. You reference a study that you did with VMCZ, the state of journalism ethics in Zimbabwe, whereby you're saying ethics is or are on the decline. I'm not going to worry about whether ethics will decline or not. That's a peripheral concern for me. But I think what would be my concern then is around the use of the word increase, which I think was the essence of your study. Because you see, when I'm thinking about increase in quotes here, it's a comparative reference you're making, which means something is increasing from something. We're talking about variables also. But then what I would need to then know is, when you say in general terms between 2013 and now, I assume, or the time the publication was produced, when you say there was an increase, also there was a decline in ethics. What declined exactly? In other words, I have this concern to understand whether your study was based on perception of the people who responded, or you were quantitative in the manner in which you carried out the research. Because my suspicion is that maybe ethical standards or ethical values have always been as bad as they are today. And therefore, when you talk of a decline, as I said, a decline is a comparative reference. You then need to, try and then explain what exactly went down in this particular regard. I know we've been engaged in a similar conversation with people like Lofty before. Lofty doesn't like the word ethical standards when we're talking about these declines or increases. I can't remember what he prefers, but he doesn't quite like it as ethical standards. So then maybe you would want to explain that. And then my second question is around the methodology that you used. Because right from the start you said you briefly articulated the methodology that you used in this particular study, should I call it a presentation? When you say, when you make reference to respondents, and you're talking about 14 females versus 58 males. Oh no, there was a total of 58, right? And then 14 females. Now I'm asking this question in the ongoing narrative around the inclusion of female or young voices across the board, not just in research, across the board, even in journalism practice and stuff. This is a major concern. So then when you acknowledge, or should I say admit, that you underrepresented women, deliberately or not deliberately, maybe it's not the issue for me, but there's an acknowledgement that 24% of your respondents were women, against therefore 76%.
Methodology under spotlight. Get ready to elaborate on methodology.
Thanks. Two quick ones. The first is around this new model of journalism, which is not for profit journalism, or journalism which is sort of human interest, or journalism which is pretty much operates within a sphere in which the media is no longer a business, as it were, where you don't really need to rely on the traditional streams and forms, but getting support from well-wishers that just press donate, or others, or fundraising through donors and so forth. What would be your take in so far as it being a sustainability model for the media to move from actually being a business and hence being captured to being independent and supported in various forms? And then secondly, the issue around that independent fund from the state and so forth, an area that we also strongly advocated for inclusion in the Zimbabwe Media Commission Bill. I'm not too sure, Honorable Chikunya, if that was then included, that media development fund. It had been, it was in IPA, but in the ZMC bill, it had been omitted, but I think it was eventually then included. So I'm sure there is like that legal framework around a media development fund. But I'm also now looking at it practically to say, what would be your thoughts? I mean, let's give an example of ZOC. ZOC, members Mangani Corporate 102 internet-based startups, online content generation, and 102 is they are still counting. We will have more of these, opening. How now what would be then the criteria? Because surely such a fund won't be able to fund every say upstart, every initiative, every innovation. How, from a sustainability point of view, do you see such a fund operating and really contributing to critical media discourse and sustainability in Zimbabwe? Thanks.
Thank you very much, Comrade Kabila. I go to Comrade Leopold Munendele.
Timbari. I think after Blaz's presentation, he's my older brother. We interacted a lot on Twitter. I think we have to accept and deny a number of things, but in Nini, I accept quite a lot of what he was simply doing. He left nothing. And for the presentation was very fair, diligently done, and I would say to a certain extent very credible. Why? I'm being honest. When Patkatanga on the COVID-19, no one sat with most of us, so I'm speaking on my behalf. No one sat with me down, news editor and a senior reporter, just to explain what COVID-19 is. I had to Google for myself. And what I found on the internet, my sites and then forgot are credible. And I tell myself, so my knowledge was what I was actually giving other people. No one examined to see whether or not I was good enough per level. And then the other issue is on existential challenges. I think what COVID-19 did was just speed up what doctors such as Lighton Mube Alakat taught us at MSUT. Will the traditional media survive? We were learning that and expecting it to happen maybe in 2050, 2060. But COVID-19 just sped it up because with 2020, barely 10 years from when we were learning it. So when it came to content by journalists, I think from a personal experience, stories were written in a way where, for example, when we would go to which clinic is this? So Wilkins. Who would walk into Wilkins? No pressure. Yeah, COVID chiriko. But after the late Zoro passed on, I never set foot at Wilkins. Never. So I panicked, and the stories I wrote had that at the back of my mind. I always thought this thing is dangerous. So I would sort of not regurgitate, because those are copy and paste. But you see those stories that tell us HIV, danger scale kind of stories. Those are the ones which which we began to see. Because Isusuma journalists were afraid, and we had every right. We did not have any protective clothing. There was no deliberate attempt up until Maz and Misa and Wana VMCZ presented us, quite a number of us, with equipment to FM. So that is exactly what happened. And then sticking on statistics, if I'm not mistaken, Mlondolo is a very good memory. I think the state at one point illegalized, criminalized reporting on numbers which you come up with from your own research. They said isusu testino ziva. You ukanyora kuti pane vanhu 100 vatestwa positive. Isu start E2 talk to her. So at the end of the day, yes, of course, journalists do not like numbers. I don't even like numbers. But for my safety, in the current Zimbabwe we are living in, and I agree with all the democratic statements you were sharing around that journalists were endangered spaces in Zimbabwe. That is true. So for my safety, I had to wait for that PDF which was given to us between 10 and 12 midnight every day, and then write 7 more cases. You were forced at the end because for your own safety. So I hope my bit and this could defend but don't explain how background. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Comrade Leo. It reminds me of Foucault, discourse authorizes those who can speak and cannot speak at any given moment. So it speaks to that aspect or that subject of numbers. You are not authorized by discourse, young men. I think there being no more questions, I will ask Comrade Lucero to respond. Over to you, sir.
Those are the failures of technology. A microphone is like a lady. If you don't use it for long, it will slip. Right. Brother Tawanda is raised pertinent. Those are the lighter moments. You know, a microphone and a laptop. Those two, you must continue using them. If you don't, they will fall asleep. Mkoma Tawanda said, what was the rationale for arriving at the conclusion that there is an incipient decline, that's the term I have used, of ethical journalism in Zimbabwe? There are two bases to my arrival at that conclusion. The first one is that of the previous ethics report. So I was comparing what then was presented in the previous ethics report in 2018 and what I proffered in 2020. That's one. But more critically, Mkoma Tawanda, let's not pretend as if our journalism never shined. You know, that's where we have a conflict with the so-called veteran journalists. They will tell you of a certain golden era. But indeed, if you go to the morgues of Herald Daily News and read the copy of 1993 by Nyasha Nyakunu, who will succeed Mugabe, you will feel a certain atmosphere which you cannot feel right now, which you can both qualitatively and quantitatively arrive at a certain empirical but subjective conclusion that there is an incipient decline. There is indeed an incipient decline of journalism ethics, as was confirmed surprisingly by both the state-owned and privately owned journalists, media houses, journalists and editors. These are the ones who made these submissions. So out of a reasonable sample of 48 people, if you have all 48 people coming into concurrence that are indeed, in terms of ethics, we are failing, and they were giving certain reasons, media capture, others were giving funny reasons to say we are poor, therefore we are unethical, etc. The common denominator was that
indeed these respondents, the participants in my research sample, they all concurred that there is an incipient decline. And there are certain substantiated reports. If we flash back to 2002, the Media Ethics Committee of 2002, set by Jonathan Moyo, it came out with almost similar pointers. Even IMPI, despite its flaws, gathering people under trees to ascertain status of media in Zimbabwe, even in its deficiencies of a certain unclear methodology, it also concurred that standards of journalism in Zimbabwe, they have declined. Even if we go to Afrobarometer, the Mises Afrobarometers, if you look at the past 3 or 4 ones, each time the scorecard of media in Zimbabwe is on a consistent decline. There are no positives to say there has been an improvement. So it is on that basis. Then you pointed out that ethics are as bad as they were, but I don't think so. The binary characterization, it came with the MDC. When the MDC was formed, 2 weeks after Daily News also came in, and brazenly the Herald decided to say we are taking every position of the government of ZANU-PF, whilst the Daily News also did the contrary. So that binary characterization gave birth to what Ranger said is patriotic journalism. And the patriotic journalism has been remodeled. Right now we have what is called commissariat journalism. We have the political commissars in media houses masquerading as journalists. And again, on that basis, journalism has indeed, in terms of ethics, declined. Then I go on to the issue of gender. I mentioned it because it also worried me. I have interacted with big sisters, interacted with mentors in the media industry who are so passionate about gender. But the crisis that remains in Zimbabwe, I don't know whether it's a crisis that women hardly forthcome. The female journalists, my colleagues here, in terms of submitting themselves to these researches. Panongobuda zvigogodera na Vivena. Ndo anotokupa ma-editors chaiwo kukweso kutakabvongonyodza vaikudzoti rusero yanone as a political animal ina handidi kukotwa. No, I can hide your identity. She will still insist, I'm not comfortable. So journalists, as much as they say we speak truth to power, we want to take people accountable, they themselves are very afraid, especially the female journalists. That's one. Then secondly, the ungendered space in media is one where the female journalists have perpetually confined themselves to believe that they cannot participate surpassing a certain stage. Others would tell you, I cannot talk to you without clearance from my editor. But this is just an independent research which is aimed at benefiting the industry. And the male editors were hardly never available to grant that consent for the female colleagues to participate. So in those circumstances, what would you do as a researcher? Because you also want the female voice. You go for those who are fearless and bold. You look for your person, Zirima, you will know she's available. You will look for your Vivian, you know she's available. Then you look for other emerging courageous sisters, your Abigails, etc. But not all of them. Others will simply openly tell you that, no. I don't even want to be quoted anonymously. My boss editor will know my wedding, my phrasing. Please, let's stay out of this. So you want this research to proceed. There is nothing that you can do. Then this research, unfortunately, was also carried under the cloud cover of COVID-19 restrictions. If you look at the structure, most of the people who were working from home were females as compared to. So, ungazobvakacha kumba kwemukadzi wemunhu kuti ndauyawo kuzokuinterviewa panapa muCovid. Anokubvunza chidaka-daka chacho zvichiri zveresearch here. You see, that is another crisis that I confronted during the conduct of this research. Other voices who were critically available, who were willing to talk, the female voices, they did not have resources, your Zoom, your Skype, and they asked the researcher to provide that. So at times I resorted to those who were available, though, rather than those who were actually relevant or pertinent to the contributions of the research. So it was my willingness to have a gender balance, but at times gender hardly comes by in as much as research is concerned because of the ungendered terrain of the media industry for the past 40 years. Look at the composition even here. Look at Maz's panelists. It tells you something. My sample can actually be the best in Zimbabwe at the moment against Maz's composition for this year. So I think I've done justice to that one. Then Brother Nigel talks of a new model, not for profit. Yes, public service journalism. That is what we are advocating for. Because the moment we have journalism as an industry trying to self-sustain, it is going to die, comrade. That remodeling must come firstly from a state that has a keen interest in the promotion of democracy, in the entrenchment of democracy. Once the state has that consciousness, once journalism and the state are on the same side, surely this is likely to survive. Newsiana, they get their salaries. Do you think Newsiana contributes largely to the broader discourse against the current realities? But it is still in operation even at a loss. So we are saying journalism should be remodeled to be a non-profit-making venture, but not necessarily reduced as a charity case. Because the moment we reduce it as a charity case, it is prone to capture, as you said. But I think sustainability models can then, provided the funds, they can then be given opportunity to the industry itself. 102 online providers. I think that will be their own business. That will be their own business to see how they can remodel who gets funding, where, when, why, and how. I think what is more important is for the availing of that funding. And you realize that the independence is not lost necessarily because of funding. But it's very unfortunate because the state in Zimbabwe is actually indulged in bestiality with the media for far too long to imagine a reality where the state can actually provide a platform and funding without necessarily being involved. It's not like the likes of SABC do not have soft approaches towards the ANC or the government, but they do so in a certain subtle manner. Point it this way: we have an agricultural show. Then the first story for ZBC, president was at the agricultural show. The second story, Vice President Chiwenga visited this stand. The third story, Vice President Kembo Mohadi was at the agricultural show. The fourth story, my auxiliary Mnangagwa was at. Honestly, comrades, after 40 years, with all the intellects that we have, so something is fundamentally wrong in terms of government's perception and approach and dealing with the media. There is no media in the history of the world which has toppled the government. I don't know why government still is averse to media. Because in the 21st century, the best way to keep a secret is to let it out. Then, so the criterion I'm suggesting that the industry then has the burden to unravel for that. I'm sure at times civil society, they also receive funding from the same pots, but they have never quarreled or scrambled. They simply know that against this theme for this year, funding is likely to go this direction or that direction. I think that's a good, otherwise we could have witnessed the fierce fights in the civil society. Then my brother talked about something to do with, he gave me the vacuum that exists between
what has happened today and what should have happened or why should have happened, it's investigative journalism. Zimbabwe to start to report about that. We wait for a thief to be caught. We wait for a minister to be fired. There is no traits of issue-driven or issue-based journalism. And issue-based journalism is the perfect opportunity where investigative journalism thrives. And again, because investigative journalism takes months, at times can take years, that's where I am advocating for some form of donor-funded or donor-driven journalism to sustain operations of certain journalism which are faced by resource constraints. The COVID story was an opportune moment for investigative journalism, but it was buried with events. We have actually buried the COVID story with the burial of the relaxation of restrictions. So I think based on those submissions, we have to stop for now.
Our economy theory of the media, if you go back to your Graham and Murdoch, if you go back to McChesney, etc., you are talking about a donor fund-driven media. I will remind you that ways of funding or financing the media have got consequences on the range of discourses that eventually find themselves in the public sphere. Whose interests would they be promoting? If you talk about donor fund-driven media, what are the implications when it comes to the autonomy of the media? What are the implications? We have always been complaining, for instance, about the capture by the state. Don't you find or don't you see ourselves dragging ourselves into the capture by the market? So what are the consequences? What are the implications for democracy in terms of people accessing the public sphere? And then I would also want to draw you to another aspect that I think it was Comrade Kabila who raised it when you were talking about public service journalism. And I wanted to say, I thought when we are talking about public service journalism, we're expecting journalism perhaps that has got human or that has got public interests. In terms of moving away from moving towards a journalism that is not profit-oriented, I thought perhaps the three-tier model explains it. Well, when we have the public service, and then we have the commercial media, and then we have community media. And I think if we really move along that three-tier model, perhaps we can attain or we can achieve the kind of a media that we want. Because if you go back to community media, we're talking about media by the people, for the people, and with the people. A media model perhaps that is grounded in the democratic participant media theory, which tries to insulate itself from the dictates or the influences of both the market and political actors. So I think if we move towards that kind of a model, perhaps it can save us. And then, I think those were my pertinent issues. I think we can debate or we can talk about them later. I would want us to move on to the last aspect before I call Comrade Lofty. So at this moment, I would ask you guys or everybody here to contribute. The last aspect, we are talking about resolutions and practical steps on enhancing the media sustainability during the post-COVID-19. So during those deliberations, perhaps, I also expect you I expect us or everyone in the room to highlight his or her own suggestions in terms of how perhaps the media can be self-sustainable. These are lessons from COVID-19, and we are also going to identify what we call the major resolutions or the major areas that we discussed or agreed upon today. Pandenge nishitaura Comrade Leon ndokumbira mutise take note of indikufamba zvinhu zvichataura unotaura ndiyo reropasi. Right, so our observations, our suggestions in terms of how we need to proceed sustaining the media. What are the lessons, guys? Musanyanya zvineta zvenyu mazi iri kutenga whisky manje manje saka itogara muri energized. Ndoiziva zvangu ini.
Yeah, we are lecturers. When people don't want to talk, you know, I'm notoriously known for my 4-hour lectures at the university. So we'll talk until everyone goes home. Yeah, in terms of key lessons, one pertinent issue which is the House has agreed, I think, which is the lowest hanging fruit, is the industry police engagement, which our Assistant Commissioner is vehemently promised and swore by all the gods on earth that it is going to materialize. I think that's a critical takeaway in terms of starting analysts to ensure a harmonious or a cordial relationship, which was not a coup, actually took that job from me because everything had been set, including even the invoices, to train the police. So I think I encourage the Mazi and the police to set the ball rolling in terms of, I think firstly there must be just meetings that will break the ice, because police, ordinary police who are not particularly in the information or media department, they all view media as an enemy. So I think what is more important is firstly to establish rapport. The rapport that we have with Assistant Nyathi might not be the same rapport with the next Assistant who does not have familiarization with how the media works. Thank you. I will come back again if this house remains quiet.
Thank you very much, Varusero. So continue speaking. Somebody else. The comrade left.
Thank you. I think I want to add on to what Comrade Busero added. Maybe it was coming from the Commissioner also in terms of having, is it a hotline? Did you promise that, ASCOM? I think you promised that there should be a hotline to assist members of the media to report directly. I think it's something we learned from, that there could be that cooperation and that direct assistance for the media. But I also want to allude to something that the PMSEC also alluded to in terms of that ongoing cooperation and to enhance the issue of the contact between the ministry and the police whenever a journalist is in trouble. Where that nexus of when a media practitioner is in a case of trouble, they will go to the ministry, who would go straight to the Assistant Commissioner. I think that nexus needs to be captured so that it can be explored further.
Thank you very much, my brother. All right, my brother.
Hello, comrades. I had lots of things I wanted to say, but after Comrade Rusero was giving that speech, I was busy tweeting out everything he was saying. My favorite one was where you said the state has for too long been engaged in bestiality with the media. So I was busy tweeting that when it was the question time for you. But now that I'm done tweeting all your quotable quotes, comrade, and if you want to apply sometime to be Minister of Information, I'm sure you could get that job. You've got the quotable quotes. I definitely agree with what you're saying in terms of how COVID-19 has shifted the landscape. I think we're in a situation where so much of our traditionally mainstream media are either captured on the verge of being captured. I think in terms of media sustainability, I think it's not necessarily all negative, and I think there are a few options. I think it's not either or. It's not either it's journalism should be funded or journalism should be commercial. I think we've got some interesting new startups, some that have been going for a few years, that are really pioneering some interesting ways of of doing journalism and generating revenues with that. I think iHarare is a great example, 263 Chat and others. They're getting important information out there, but they're generating revenue through it. And then the second option, like you spoke of, is public interest journalism. And that's where I think, of course, there is a need for for funding for that, for investigative journalism and so forth, so comrades can focus on doing their 2-month investigation of a story and knowing that salaries will be paid and they're doing very important work. So I think there's quite a few diverse options out there in Zimbabwe as we speak in terms of sustainability. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right.
Yeah, I think one thing that also came out from Mr. Sero's presentation was the utilization of the Media Defense Fund. We would really maybe need to check the status of the Media Defense Fund, the Media Development Fund, sorry, the Media Development Fund. I'm so used to the Media Defense Fund in the context of MISA's work.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think another area which is quite critical, which Alex brought out, is commitment by a government department, government information ministry to issues related to the media, as demonstrated by the honorable, I will call him honorable secretary, who has decided to absent himself. At least we should have had another, because there was supposed to be another officer from the ministry remaining behind to take down some of these points. My qualm is with that commitment. I think as comrades we've always hammered on this one. The status of our relationship with our information ministry. I wrote an article quite recently on Newshawks about the communication structure of this country. And I raised some questions as to whether, at its current state, it actually plays its role. Let's re-examine the role of the ministry vis-a-vis the media industry. Where are we? What points of cooperation? Is there commitment? Are we just inviting ministry officials to come and give keynote addresses and then they go away without them having any takeaways, apart from the perception that I always have that we are at loggerheads, or we are always fighting? I think we need to examine that and continue to explore ways in which we can re-examine and also engage with ministry, so that they also come through and hear some of our concerns, including the fund, which is quite critical at this moment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mkoma Lennox. There is, okay.
I think the other critical one, I'll take it from my chairperson's presentation in terms of the media law reforms, that while least we acknowledge that the reforms to the media have been good, we need to flag out the other amendments that the government is coming up with, like in the purported Patriot Act, which they regressed on. Now they are going to infuse it in, is it called the Criminal Reform Codification? Yes, so I want to note the chairperson's very important call that while we welcome the reforms, we also need to be mindful and challenge the government on some of the laws they want to amend, which might be a regression of where we are currently after repealing IPA.
Change without a change. Thank you very much, Comrade Lofty. All right, Comrade Tawani.
Thank you. I think, Lofty, I will start from that point, that we actually need a resolution on broadening the scope of reforms. Because what is happening is that while you are concentrating on the ones brought on the table formally, others are sprouting from all over. So I think there's need for a holistic approach towards law reform beyond the mainstream media ones. The second one, we spoke to great length about the ZMC bill and another one, emerging media practitioners. So there is also need to start gravitating towards testing co-regulation. And with the presence of the police, the government stakeholders, it will be good to start testing the co-regulatory framework that we are establishing, so that the public gains confidence. The other one is to popularize the outcome of our monitoring in terms of violations. I think on such a day we need to have a build-up
in terms of how many people have been affected by attacks and so forth, and how stakeholders can have a multiple approach in responding to the same. The last component is related to Dr. Tubiru Sero. I think he would get a professorship before a doctorate. I think the issue that I want to raise is that we need to start engaging broadly the academia to examine the issues of sustainability and build as much as is possible evidence towards how best to stimulate sustainability within the media. So the end point of the presentation today is to build more muscle so that we can have a more sustainable media going forward. Thank you.
Sorry, he also raised something pertinent in his presentation, that is Mr. Rosero. He also mentioned that we tend to think that in terms of our trainings, our capacity building, we should only target the journalists, those that are practicing, but that the media trainers also need training. So that I think it's something that we can capture, that whenever we are in our, as media representative organizations, whenever we have our training workshops, we should also consider them so that they also stay abreast with the trends and developments within the media.
Baloko. Yes, comrade. Now I'm happy everyone wants to speak now.
Okay, yeah.
for you to respond to. And they hardly come to you and say, hey, can you do this? And from experience, I've also seen that it's hardly the case that they ever come to you and say, can you do this and that? They give you broad parameters, but they don't give you broad parameters, strictly speaking, because you are the one who says, I reside in that broad parameter. So then what I'm trying to do is to try to dispel what I think is a myth around donor dependence and therefore lack of media independence. Because at the end of the day, you will retain your independence as it was before you got engaged with that particular donor. And I stand to be corrected, and I think if there's a counter narrative to that, I would welcome it very much. Because I'm talking from experience. We agree that we are interested in this, we've been doing this, and therefore we can play together, so to speak. And the issue of capture by donors has never floated around, as far as I'm concerned.
Certainly, I belong to the counter narrative when it comes to independence and autonomy issues, but I will allow others to speak for now.
Okay, thank you. So maybe, so I save future researchers from being put in a tight corner over gender issues. I think there is a deliberate need by trainers such as Alakat and Dr. Sero. Murugu College, I don't know I don't know the formula you use, but please encourage these girls to speak up, encourage them to attend press conferences, diaries, whatever, to ask questions whether it's wrong or right. They'll be told you are biased, but that's how you also get a bit strong. Expose. So I think there's a deliberate need for you guys to, maybe at least if we start from there, because before they come into the industry.
Thank you very much, Leo. In my own experience, it's just like what Comrade Rusero pointed out. Each time when I conduct research about the media in Zimbabwe, I normally get, most of my respondents are just males. Females or women, and generally they are a bit reserved when it comes to responding to interview questions. Yes, perhaps we actually need a systematic study on why they don't want to participate. Why perhaps the research has to be conducted by women, perhaps they will also be willing to participate in that case. Having said that, yeah, I think pertinent issues or key issues have been articulated, and at this moment now, ladies and gentlemen, I will call upon my good brother, Comrade Loft, the director. You are still the director of the VMCZ. We are now the president of the organization, Comrade Loft, to come and give us a vote of thanks. Executive Director. Executive Director.
Very much. It's been a long day. We've had a very interactive day. I guess we're tired. We've been here for more than how many hours? It's been a very, very long day. Allow me to thank people who have met this day. A resounding success it has been. We have had key resolutions that would guide our media operations into the next year. We will come back next year and reflect on what we decided on today. Allow me to thank our media stakeholders who in all their diversity and made these stakeholders very interactive in terms of exchanging ideas and pertinent issues that pertain to the operation of the media. We also want to extend a special thanks to the chairperson of the Parliamentary Portfolio Committee on Media, the newly minted chairperson, and the members of the Parliamentary Portfolio Committee. I can see Honorable Chikwinya is still here. Paratza was here for most part of the day. Also, I want to thank Assistant Commissioner Paul Nyathi, representing the Zimbabwe Republic Police. We have heard you the whole day. Key critical discussions around safety of journalists and the way the media and the police should interact. There's no way these two should be separate from each other. Whenever you get an accident, the people who would be there hustling and bumping into each other are the police and the media, apart from the other emergency sectors. So they are a critical component. We need each other, and for that to happen, they have to be a cordial and symbiotic relationship between these groups. I also want to thank CSO representatives who are here present, also local, regional, and international representatives from cooperating partners. And finally, I want to thank all of you who have come and made this day a great success. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Comrade Loft, but you forgot to thank the facilitator, so that it borders on treason, and I'm sure the...
my masters, which was supervised by him, might be withdrawn. I thought I said with you, I want to thank Dr. Ncube for handling this conference quite well. I've had a lot of, he taught me critical. Am I a critical thinker? I'm not sure. If I'm a bad critical thinker, blame it on him. He is the part on the lack of critical. It was my critical, what was the subject called? Critical media theory, where you critically dissect issues. I want to thank him for handling this conference. You will agree with me that this went absolutely well due to his diligence and the capabilities. Thank you very much.
Right, now you are pardoned. No more treason charges against you, Comrade Loft. Ladies and gentlemen, vote of thanks, Yaitwa, and everything. Yeah. It marks the end. Thank you very much.